The final installment of the Paranormal Activity franchise is on the way, so let's recap the key details from the first 5 films. Film number 1 begins in September 2006 and introduces us to Katie and Micah, a young couple living in a cozy home in San Diego, California. When Katie tells Micah about the evil entity that's been haunting her since she was a child, he decides to get a fancy camera and record what goes down while they're asleep at night. Scary things start to happen, and then, on night 21, Micah is awoken by Katie screaming. He rushes downstairs to help, but moments later, his body is hurled back into the bedroom, after which Katie comes in, comes towards the camera, smiles, and then seemingly transforms into a demon. The events of Paranormal Activity 2 happen in 2006 as well. This time, the primary location is the humble abode of Katie's sister, Christy, which she shares with her husband Dan, their baby boy Hunter, and Dan's daughter Allie. After a mysterious break-in, Dan decides to set up security cameras around the house. When things aren't going bump in the night, Allie does a little research and discovers
it has been said that if a human makes a bargain with a demon for wealth, power, or any other benefit, they must forfeit their firstborn male.
She connects the dots and realizes that Hunter is the first male-born child into their family for many generations. After Christy tries to protect Hunter and is dragged off into the basement, Dan insists that they attempt to exorcise the demon from her and pass it over to Katie. 3 weeks later, Katie comes for a visit and tells Christy about the strange things going down in her place. The night after Micah is killed, Katie is caught on the security camera breaking into Christy's home, killing her and Dan, and leaving with baby Hunter. Paranormal Activity 3 takes us back to 1988 when a young Katie and Christy were living with their mother Julie and her boyfriend Dennis. When Dennis notices that strange things have been happening ever since Christy started chatting up an imaginary friend named Toby, he opts to set up cameras around the house and, as you might expect, scary things start to happen.
Don't sit there, that's Toby's spot.
In between the late night scares, Dennis finds a symbol drawn on the walls of Katie and Christy's closet that comes from a witch's coven.
They would have these ceremonies, and they would wait till the girls were old enough to get pregnant, and then they would take their sons.
Right. Dennis and Julie come face to face with this coven when they take the girls to their grandmother Lois's house. In the middle of the night, Julie disappears. Dennis freaks out and encounters a whole batch of weird ladies dressed in black. Dennis tries to hide with Christy, but spots Katie crying next to Julie's dead body. He goes to help, but when Katie turns around, she shows off her demon face, much like in the first film. Dennis is ultimately killed by an unseen force, and then, as if nothing happened, Lois escorts Katie and Christy upstairs with Christy calling for Toby to join them.
Come on, Toby.
Paranormal Activity 4 takes place in November 2011, 5 years after the events of the original film. Alex and her little brother Wyatt have a run-in with Robbie, the creepy kid next door. When Robbie's mom is taken to the hospital, Robbie comes to stay with them until she gets home. Wyatt and Robbie get all buddy-buddy, and Robbie introduces Wyatt to his good friend, you guessed it, Toby. Alex's boyfriend sets up laptop cameras around the house, and guess what? Scary things start to happen. One day, Alex catches Wyatt going into Robbie's house, so follows, and finally meets Robbie's mother. Katie? Oh, Wyatt is Hunter. Eventually, Alex's parents and boyfriend bite the dust, and she finds Wyatt/Hunter in Robbie's house. Alex tries to convince him to run, but he doesn't move. A whole bunch of creepy coven ladies approach, and that's the end of Alex. Paranormal Activity: The Marked Ones was meant to be a separate spin-off series, but there's still a good deal of crossover here. The story takes place in June 2012. Our main man is Jesse, a recent high school grad. He and his best buddy Hector become obsessed with one of their neighbors, who they suspect is a witch. They have some fun spying on her, but then she dies. One morning, Jesse wakes up with a bite mark on his arm and has the power to beat up bad guys superhero style. As the days go on, Jesse gets weird and moody, so his friends meet up with Allie from the second movie, who gives them the rundown.
It's the sign of the midwives. They're a coven. The midwives will mark an unborn male in utero, and then they wait for the baby to mature until he's ready to be possessed.
When things get super violent and Jesse disappears, his friends decide to go to the location of the final ritual, Lois's house. Eventually, Hector is the only one left, and while trying to escape, Hector dashes through a huge brown door covered in symbols, the camera glitches, and Hector winds up in a new house. And guess what? It's Katie and Micah's house. It turns out he traveled back in time to the night of Micah's murder. Katie comes downstairs and Hector begs for her help, but she screams. Micah comes running and attacks Hector, thinking he's an intruder. But Katie winds up stabbing Micah instead, and then Hector runs off and right into Jesse, who presumably kills him. As promised by Paranormal Activity producer Jason Blum, the Ghost Dimension will finally show Toby and answer questions raised in the previous films. We'll see how that plays out when the final Paranormal Activity film hits theaters on October 23rd.